I didn't hear the splash so much as the sudden silence after the shove. The absence of boat music, of laughter, of that tinny champagne clatter. Like a door closing on the life I'd built. The air tore past my ears. My fingertips scraped. The polished rail, and the world narrowed to the color of the sea below me. A painted blue that looked soft as velvet until it swallowed me whole. The water was a slap that knocked the breath out of me. I went under, and the yacht's white belly cut a clean, arrogant line across my last view of the sun. Somewhere above, over the thudding of my heartbeat, someone laughed. Light, tinkling, familiar. "Say hi to the sharks," my daughter-in-law had whispered into my ear, close enough that I felt the warmth of her breath before the cold of the fall. Then the water sealed that sentence inside me like a secret. I am Emma Johnson, 68 years old, survivor of markets that tried to drown me long before the sea did. I built Johnson Meridian, a shipping and logistics empire that learned the language of satellites and storms. And I made myself a power people pretended not to see. I have drunk cheap coffee at 3 a.m. while numbers burned at the edge of ruin. I have signed contracts in rooms that smelled of cold marble and older money. I have sat with men who believed they were lions and learned the exact tone to make them sit. I thought I understood betrayal as a thing with crisp edges and predictable costs. But betrayal is never neat. It is a shove between shoulder blades on a perfect morning, carried out by someone who once kissed your son under your lemon trees. Under the water. I opened my eyes and saw my own hair, silver threads waving like seagrass, curl around my face. The yacht engine throbbed through my body and faded. For a second I floated suspended in blue, and it was quiet. And then the taught lessons snapped into place. I kicked hard, pulled for the surface, broke into screaming air, and blinked salt out of my eyes. "Help!" I called, automatic and thin. The yacht's stern dwindled, white on white, the suggestions of figures at the rail like cutouts in a child's paper theater. A gull slashed the sky with an ugly sound. Even now I catch myself thinking, was my son smiling? Not with joy. Never. That. It was the curve of relief people reserve for endings. The involuntary surrender of the shoulders after a heavy burden is finally set down. If I had not been his mother, if I had not known the shape of his face from the day he was born, I might have called it the smile of a stranger. But I am, and I do. I saw the boy in him vanish as the yacht turned its shined flank and moved away. Salt stung my throat. I floated, watched, took a breath measured in 4 counts the way my old swimming coach had taught me the summer I was 16, and decided the ocean and I needed a truce. The yacht's name, Meridian Star, briefly flashed at an angle on the hull. I had named it when I thought that the compass always finds home if you own the sky. The irony made me almost laugh, which would have been a waste of air. I'm not a woman who goes into the sea without intention. The bracelet at my wrist, elegant, silver, gifted by the sort of European prince who collects yacht invitations like coins, was a pretty device for people who fear falling off docks. I designed a better version for myself. My bracelet has a shrill private voice. I thumbed the recessed switch with salt-slick fingers, felt the click, counted 5, and felt it click again. At Johnson Meridian, we drilled on seconds like other companies drill on slogans. 5 seconds sends a signal to the tender. 10 seconds sends one to the helicopter team. 30 seconds, and every vessel we own within 200 nautical miles hears me. 5, 10, 30. I didn't make it to 30. The ocean looks like a sheet. It is a fabric stitched with rip and pull. A swell lifted me. A swell dropped me. I kept my chin up and my eyes on a fixed point. An ugly orange dot on the horizon I guessed might be a research buoy. A dispassionate part of me noted that the Water here smelled cleaner than the Gulf lanes I'd known as a girl. I thought of my father's hands. Rope-marked. Blunt. And of his laugh when he told me the sea would take you if you forgot what you owed it. I had been paying the ocean all my life. I wasn't going to default today. By the time the tender cut a skidding half-moon around me, minutes had stiffened everything. The deckhand reached. I hooked his wrist with the viper grip, the self-defense. Instructor drilled into me when my head of security, kindly and stubborn, told me wealth looks like a magnet. I was a magnet. I hooked, he pulled, and the world tilted hard the other way. The deck smelled like diesel and lemon oil. I coughed up salt. "Miss Johnson," the deckhand said, eyes wide under his cap. A boy, really. I remembered his name a moment later, Mateo. He'd told me once he sent half his pay to a mother in Veracruz who liked flowers. Argyranthemum, I remembered. The specific daisy. That's the sort of thing my mind keeps when it discards birthdays. "Thank you," I said. "Bring me the black case from under the starboard locker, and a blanket." He hesitated. He had seen the yacht turn away. He had seen who was aboard it. The lines in his face, faint as pencil, arranged themselves into a decision. "Si, jefa," he said. The blanket slurred me into warmth I didn't deserve yet. The black case was dry and heavy, and full of the sort of items that make lawyers breathe differently. A satellite phone, a sealed folder, a small pistol. I allowed myself more for a feeling than for use. I opened the folder with fingers that shook, and passed the first page to Mateo. A letter already signed, naming him acting captain of the tender, with instructions for emergency extraction. He stared at it. "Acting captain?" His voice cracked on the second word. "I am indisposed," I said. "And the star appears to have lost sight of me." He looked toward the star's wake, then to the horizon with its ugly orange dot. He made the sign of the cross so fast his fingers blurred. "Where do we go, jefa?" "Las Palomas," I said. "Back channel, quietly, and fast." Las Palomas is a private island on paper, a reef with a strip of sand in practice, and a node, in my network in truth. We built a hurricane refuge there, windowless, squat, not beautiful, and stuffed it with generators, water, and devices that talk more clearly than people do. On maps, it looks forgettable. I have lived long enough to love the forgettable. The ride hammered my spine. I wrapped the blanket tighter, pictured the star glittering toward the mainland, imagined the scene. My son, my daughter-in-law, the scattered guests. The bottle left open with its trapped scent of pear and metal. The staff trained to look at the horizon when people become unfortunate. Had they rehearsed? Surely. Had they thought of the cameras? Of course. They'd hired a man last year who loved nothing in this world except clean angles. But they had not thought of me still breathing. People don't, once they decide you are inconvenient. My son is called Michael, and even now the name puts a taste in my mouth like copper. He was a serious child, eyes too big for his face, with a way of folding carefulness into anything that frightened him. I once watched him dismantle a wind-up toy just to understand why the bird whistled. He cried after he cracked it, and the bird stopped singing. I bought him another bird, and he refused to touch it, as if gifts had rules he had broken once and would not break again. His wife is Lila. She arrived like an advertisement for a life I don't trust. Smart in the sharp, easy way of people who never had to hide their intelligence. Funny when it cost her nothing. A genius in the ghastly art of belonging. She remembered names for rooms and made me think she remembered hearts. The first time Michael brought her to the island, She wore flat sandals expensive enough to sneer at gravel, and laughed at one of my security men's jokes. She repeated it later to deliver it properly. That was when I marked her. Not unkindly, not even suspiciously, just noted. I keep notes. That has always been my blessing and my curse. The tender knifed through the water. Spray salted my lips. Every mile we put between us and the star loosened something in my back. When Las Palomas humped up out of the sea like the mussed back of a sleeping animal, I exhaled for the first time without counting. Mateo nosed us in behind the reef, where the water calmed to the color of an old bottle. The bunker crouched above the sand, ugly and certain. Inside, the air held that faint, burnt smell generators give off when no human has been there to speak to them. I took the satellite phone and called the single most valuable number in my life. "Mrs. Johnson," said the voice that answered on the half-ring. "I was beginning to worry you'd never need me again." "Don't be sentimental, Rupert," I said. "I'm alive." "It pleases me to hear it," Rupert said, and the smile flexed in his voice like an old cat stretching. "Tell me where you are." "Palomas. I've had an accident." "I see." Which in Rupert means, I will wait for facts, not drama. "Do you require medical aid?" "Not yet. I require discretion. Always. And the plan? We execute the living version, not the memorial." "Very good," he said. And in the brief silence I heard him shuffle papers that did not actually exist. Rupert keeps everything in his head and stores fake stacks for the comfort of clients who need the ritual. "Shall I notify the Foundation?" "Not yet." The word was a stone I dropped down a well to hear how deep it is. "Begin with the banks." "Of course. And the boy?" "The boy. He will always be my boy in Rupert's mouth, because Rupert has known me since the day I signed my first contracts with a pen that leaked, in a blazer that cost less than the taxi ride to the office. He poured me a drink that day and told me there were two kinds of riches. The kind you count, and the kind other people count for you. He taught me how to make the second kind devour the first, if I ever needed a dragon. "The boy," I said, "is about to discover suddenly that he has no credit at any table with my name on it. A pity," Rupert said in the tone of a man who observes weather. "And the girl?" "The girl," I said, "will learn something about sharks." He made a sound that might have been approval and might have been indigestion. "I'll call. You back in 20 minutes. He called in 15. By then I had peeled off the wet clothes and warmed my hands around tea that tasted like iron, because the mug rusted at the rim. The bunker's single small window framed a slice of afternoon now frowning toward evening. I had used this place to ride out storms that shredded roofs like paper. It had never felt more mine. "Your accounts are locked," Rupert said without greeting. "All signatures require your physical presence. The speech you're scheduled to give tonight at the Meridian Women's Summit will be delivered by your hologram. Cancel it." A scandal. A postponement. My office will issue. The sort of statement that says nothing and sounds responsible. As you wish. And the more delicate matter. "Proceed," I said. There was a pause. Rupert enjoys his little theatrical layer cakes. The deed transfer filed Monday was never recorded. The attorney who attempted it forgot, it seems, that the registrar plays chess with me on Thursdays. "Very good," I said. I allowed myself one long breath. On Monday, Michael and Lila had made me sign papers in the garden. "Just routine, Mother," Michael had said, rushing in late for our lunch, smelling faintly of something I could not place. Lila had brought lemon bars and a pen with a blue barrel. My hand had trembled, but only slightly, with anger I pretended was age. My anger seldom shakes. I signed what they asked because I wanted to see how far they would go. And one more note, Rupert said. The yacht's onboard cameras suffered a tragic failure starting at 10:32 this morning. Bad memory cards, it appears. I'm sure our friends will be disappointed. Bad memory cards, I said. And finally low and private, I laughed. Rupert. Yes, Mrs. Johnson. Thank you. We aren't finished, he said, until I hear you pour a drink at home. Then keep your ear tuned, I said, and hung up. Matteo hovered in the doorway, hat in hand. Yefa, he said carefully. The star is not coming back. I know, I said. Your son. He trailed off. My son is a frightened man, surrounded by someone very brave in the wrong direction, I said. Help me get to the mainland. We left the bunker as the sky turned that impossible bruised gray that makes the sea look older. The tender coughed, wove, and found its speed. My bones stopped insisting on their own rights. I thought of sharks and had the ridiculous urge to thank them for not being in a mood. We made the marina in dusk, the docks hopping with the quiet. Urgency of people who understand the wind is about to change. I drew the hood of a borrowed sweatshirt forward and walked quickly, the way I used to leave deals. Not running. Running is an admission. Just slicing through spaces like they were shaped for me. In the car, I dried my hair with the vent heat and watched the lights of the island slide away. On the back road, the live oaks made a kind of tunnel. My house. Stone, low, more honest than the penthouse where the world pretends to admire you, glowed at the end of the driveway like a mouth in a fable. Inside, everything smelled like lemon and old books, a combination that calms me more than any doctor's prescription. I locked the door myself. I have staff for that, and I did it myself. Some tasks remind you who you are. I walked to the study, turned on the lamp that makes a pool like an interrogation, and sat in the leather chair where I've cried exactly twice in 20 years. Once when my husband died, once when Michael left. For California with a suitcase and a mouthful of apologies, he believed. On the desk sat an object I had prepared months ago, and hoped I'd never have to present. It was wrapped in blue paper that had cost too much because I enjoyed the petty triumph of paying too much for something that would become trash. I tied the white ribbon around it myself, my fingers steady. A vehicle rolled into the drive. I heard it the way old houses hear. Wood shifting, a small sigh from the front door's brass. I checked the monitor. Worked, thank you. And saw the car I had paid for, driven poorly by a man I had paid for, who thought perhaps that money meant I had no eyes. The cameras drank in the faces of my son and his wife as rain began to lay its first mild hands on the roof. I smoothed my hair back. Age has made my face austere. Survival has made it kind in ways I dislike to admit. I set the blue gift box in the center of the desk and folded my hands beside it. There is a particular quiet that falls in a house you own outright when people who want something from you come to the door. It is not fear. Fear has edges. It is the soft hush of a theater audience just before the curtains lift, the intake of breath that measures itself in hope and dread. I felt that hush spread through the rooms like steam. The knob turned. My son entered first, wet at the temple, shirt open at the collar like he'd had to pull it over his head in a hurry. Behind him, Lila glowed the way beautiful people glow when they think the plot has favored them. She stopped when she saw me. Michael did not. He took 2 more steps, as if physics had promised him the room would be empty. "Mother," he said. His voice hardly wobbled. He is very good at disguising wobble. "Michael," I said. "Lila." Lila's mouth made a small O that would have looked charming over a cake with too many candles. "Emma," she breathed. She clasped her hands as if there might be a camera. Habits. Habits. We were so worried." "Of course you were," I said. Michael swallowed, which is how his throat has tried to solve problems since he was a boy. He looked at my hair, at the chair, at the teacup with the rusted rim. His eyes snagged on the blue gift box. "What is that?" "A present," I said. "For you both." I slid it across the desk until it sat in a shaft of lamplight, as pretty as an apology. "You should open it together." Lila moved first. Of course she did. She has the kind of courage that keeps a list of acceptable risks. She tugged the ribbon loose and peeled back the paper carefully. She hates waste only when it is visible. The lid lifted with that modest whisper new boxes make. Inside lay a single object resting on black felt. A stainless steel knife with the Yacht, short, curved blade, the handle engraved with the meridian star's longitude and latitude. It was not large. It did not need to be. At the tip of the blade, lashed neatly with red silk thread, glittered a shark's tooth as white as the part of the ocean where light still decides to matter. Lila stared. Michael's throat worked. Outside, the rain decided to become serious. I folded my hands on the desk and waited for them to be brave enough to look at me. Michael looked first. He always did. His eyes went where the danger might be, and Lila's went where the light was. The knife caught the lamplight and threw it back at them in a sharp little blink, like the attention a cat offers before it chooses to scratch. The tooth was small but perfect, serrations tidy as a banker's smile. Lila recovered before he did. What a dramatic paperweight," she said, laughter peeling off her tongue in thin strips. "Is this a joke? You almost gave me a heart attack." "You don't own that word yet," I said. "Sit down." She didn't, which I admired on a level I'm not proud of. Michael sat. He sank into the chair across from me as if gravity suddenly remembered it had a claim on him. Water slid from a lock of hair down his temple. He didn't brush it away. "I fell off my yacht," I said. "One of those freak accidents you hear about, where a woman of a certain age misjudges a step and, whoops, finds herself talking to fish." Lila's mouth did the small O again. "Emma, you're shaking. My God, you must be in shock. Let me—" "I'm shaking because I prefer my tea without salt." I set the cup aside. "Michael, look at me." He did, if eyes could be phone. Booths, his were, the old kind with glass panels and a heavy door you cannot quite close. "You pushed me," I said to Lila. "But you both sent me into the water." Michael made a sound, the half-formed syllable a child makes when he drops something that matters. "Mother, save the story for the officer who will take your statement," I said. "We're going to keep tonight civilized." Lila held my gaze, and in her eyes, I saw the outline of a future she had learned to sketch without moving her hand. She was calculating the distance to the door, the weight of Michael's loyalties, the thickness of the rug under her shoes. "You have no idea what you're—" "When you whispered in my ear," I said quietly. "Your perfume was different. You only wear that one on days you think you will not have to gnaw anything. And when you smiled at the rail, you showed your canine just slightly more on the left. You do that when you lie. It's a tiny flourish. I imagine you think it's charming." Her lips parted. She did not touch them. She is disciplined. "Emma," she said, putting my name where a weapon would go. "You're frightening me." "Not nearly finished," I said. "Michael, Tell me how long you've imagined a world that does not require me to be in it. He flinched like I had thrown something. That's not... God, that's not fair. Fair, I said, tasting the word for stones. Fair is a ledger. Fair is the number of times I turned my face from the choices you made and said, he will learn. He did learn. He learned from me. He learned how to do a thing as if it were someone else's idea. Stop! He put his hands on his knees, fingers spread, as if he could push the air away. The rain ticked on the windows, with the patience of a metronome. We didn't, Lila, don't throw the girl to the ocean, I said. It has had enough of me for one day. Lila laughed like she had discovered a secret door in a museum. You're unbelievable. Yes, I said. I am. Silence stretched, the kind that tests the beams of a house. I let it crawl over the floor, up the legs of the chairs, into the seams of the gift box. It found the tooth and curled there like a cat in a warm patch. I have locked the accounts, I said. Everyone. The board is convening at 7 in the morning to discuss a transition plan that will not include either of you on the first 3 pages. The filings you attempted on Monday have not been recorded, and will not be, now or ever. You will find that your phone calls go to voicemail, and your lawyers have developed sudden allergies to you. I recommend antihistamines. Grief is coming, and it is made of paper. Lila's face did something human then. Something raw enough to make me pity the girl she might have been if she'd been born to a world that asked her for work instead of applause. You can't do this overnight. I did it over years, I said. Tonight is just the dress rehearsal that went unexpectedly public. Michael set his elbows on his thighs and stared at the rug. His voice came from a place behind his ribs. I didn't mean for you to... He stopped, and for once he was mercifully honest. I didn't think you would live. You never did, I said. He looked up, startled. It slipped out of me too fast to cage, but I did not take it back. The first time he was 12 and stole from the cash box at the marina office, $50 and an accident of loose change, and I watched him suffer under the weight of the lie for 2 days before I asked him if he preferred to repay me in money or in help. He chose help. He raked the gravel in the dark beside me and said he didn't think the lie would survive under my eyes. He learned that night that I would endure almost anything in exchange for the truth. He learned also that I did not need the truth to be told to know it existed. Tell me how, I said to Lila, softly enough that my voice did not frighten the rain. Tell me what you told him that made him believe finally that he could breathe without me on the shore keeping the tide. Did you promise him silence? Did you promise him sleep? Or was it just your hand on his chest in the night? Your mouth? In his ear? Your hair across his pillow like a curtain he could hide behind? Color rose in her cheeks. Anger or shame I could not tell, and both were more honest than the steel she wore to breakfast. You cannot accuse me of... I can accuse you of anything, I said. I prefer evidence. Evidence, she repeated, like it was a new brand of wine she might learn to enjoy. Cameras fail, I said. Memory cards fail. People without memory cards do not. The crew will speak. The boy who drove the tender is in love with daisies for his mother. Do you think I do not know how to hold a daisy out to a boy and ask him to tell me what he saw? Michael's hand jerked. Not quite a fist. You'll ruin him. Only if you make it necessary, I said. I have no appetite for collateral. It takes too long to burn out of the curtains. He closed his eyes. He has my lashes. It is one of the unfairnesses of heredity that the prettiest things attach themselves where they can do the least good. What do you want? There it was. The question everyone asks when the ship begins to list. Not what did I do? Not how did we get here? Not why are there teeth in the velvet? What do you want? As if want were the lever that moves everything. I want my son, I said, and in the room's shallow light that sounded like a confession. I want him the way he was before he learned that shortcuts were roads, and that the people who build the bridges are weak because they do not own helicopters. He shook his head. That boy's gone. Yes, I said. And whose fault is that? You, Lila said, vicious as a nail. Yours. You made him into a mirror. Every time he looked at you, he forgot what his own face was. I turned my head. The rain found a seam and thickened its tone. If you were not the villain of this particular evening, I said, I would open a bottle and ask you to tell me all the ways I failed. I would take notes and I would send you flowers in the morning. You think this is clever, she said. You think this is a game you've already won. I know what this is, I said. This is the part where we decide whether we're a family or a headline. Michael's head came up so fast I heard something in his neck click. Headline? Attempted murder of a prominent businesswoman by her heir and his wife, I said. Dressed in yachting whites. Pity about the weather in the photo. It makes everyone look grey. He stared at me. Behind the calculation, I watched a small boy scrabbling at a fence. You wouldn't. I would do anything required to keep the sharks where they belong, I said. And they belong in the ocean, Michael. Not at my table. He swallowed. What does family look like to you, then? Accountability, I said. You come with me in the morning to the office. You sit where the board can look at you through their sharp little lenses. You tell them a version of the truth that does not require me to be dead to be believed. You resign your positions. You step away for 3 years. You do something useful with your hands that does not include signing your name on other people's work. The foundation will fund a project of your choosing if it passes my standards for harm. You will live in the house on Bay Street, under the supervision of a woman named Alma, who does not like you and will not care when you sulk. You will attend counseling with Dr. Jose, and you will answer her questions instead of interrogating them. You will decline interviews. You will not go on podcasts, Michael. They are not churches for sinners. They are ovens. And me? Lila said, arms folding. She made it look like she was keeping herself warm. My program? You will pack. A bag tonight, I said. You will go to the cottage on Palmetto Lane. The keys are in the kitchen drawer under the tea towels. Malcolm never remembers they are there because Malcolm believes keys live in bowls. You will sleep. In the morning you will come to my office, and you will give me the names of the people who advised you. You will tell me where the idea began. You will swear on whatever you believe in that you will not contact any of the men you imagine are powerful, and then you will leave this city for as long as it takes for your name to be something people have to search for. Exile, she said, and the word pleased her despite herself. How imperial. Humane, I said. The other options don't involve lamps and tea. She set the lid gently back on the box. Her eyes were cool again, the anger caged and fed. And if I say no? Then you will discover that Rupert likes puzzles, and that prosecutors like to be famous, I said. You will also learn, to your surprise, I think, that the public is as sentimental about old women who swim as it is savage about young women who do not know when to stop smiling. She tilted her head. Is that a threat? It is a map, I said. I am giving you the shortest route out of a forest you wandered into because you thought you were in a mall. She laughed softly. You really are unbearable. Thank you, I said. Michael sat very still. He stared at the tooth as if it might tell him a version of the future he could live with. "Why did you put that in there?" he asked finally, voice low and wondering. "The tooth?" "Because you think of sharks as monsters," I said, "and I think of them as weather. And because the first rule of the water is that you carry a blade you can reach with either hand. You cut yourself free. You do not wait for someone to remember where the knife drawer is." He looked at me for a long moment. Then, as if his spine had been stiffened by an invisible hand, he stood. "All right," he said. "All right. I will come in the morning. I will resign. I will do the things." He smiled then, not like a man conceding, but like a boy offering something he's not sure he wants to give. "And I will do one more." I lifted an eyebrow. "I will tell the board the version that hurts me," he said, meeting my eyes with a steadiness I had not seen since a Little League field the year the pitcher was meaner than childhood allows. "I will not mention Lila, unless you make me." Lila spun. "Michael." He did not look at her. "If you want a future with me, you will make one. Not with shortcuts. With, I don't know, with days." She breathed out through her nose. "You will look very noble and very stupid in the same photograph," she said. "I have looked worse," he said. "You have," I said, unable to keep the dry affection from my voice. Lila darted her gaze between us. The rain softened. A drummer, easing off after a long solo. "So you two are... what? Back on your team? Boys versus the witch?" "No," I said. "There are no teams here. There is a shoreline. There is a tide. There are people who are learning to stand up." She stared at me for a long time. It was an honest stare, stripped of rehearsals. Finally, she closed the lid of the box with a click that sounded like punctuation. "Fine," she said. "I'll go to your cottage. I'll tell you what you want, in the morning. But don't mistake compliance for loyalty, Emma. I will not become one of your projects. Everyone I love is a project," I said. "Even myself." She picked up the box as if it had grown heavy. "Keep your tooth," she said, set it back down, and walked toward the door without looking at Michael. At the threshold, she paused, hand on wood, and turned just enough for the lamp to paint the edge of her cheekbone. "Say hi to the sharks," she said, voice flat with the memory of salt, and left. The house held its breath. I did too. We listened to the length of the hall, the old rugs behaving like conspirators, the faint whisper of the front door opening, the brief, startled hiss of rain against a face that had not expected it. The door closed. Michael sat down again. He put his head in his hands, fingers pressing at his temples like he could force new shapes into his skull. I watched him. Not with triumph. Not with the savage joy some women would have found in that posture, but with the quiet audit of a woman who has seen a storm pass and knows the roof still leaks. "Why did you marry her?" I asked, gentler than I intended. "The truth, Michael." He lifted his face. The boy was gone. The man looked like someone who had borrowed his own skin and found it did not fit. "Because she made not being you feel like an accomplishment," he said. "Because she made rooms feel easy. Because she made me look like the version of myself I wanted to be when my eyes were closed. Because I was tired of owing the ocean and the sky and the company my breath." I nodded. "Those are all good reasons," I said. "They are not durable, but they are good." He smiled and didn't. "You always say that." "Durable? Like You're shopping for a top." "I am," I said. "Life is weather." He leaned back, let his hands fall to his thighs, and looked at the ceiling as if it might offer him a simpler sentence. "Would you have forgiven me?" he asked, "if I had succeeded?" "No," I said, "but I would have loved you anyway." He inhaled sharply, as if the air had sharp corners. "I hate that answer." "I know," I said. "It's the only one I have." We sat with that for a while. The rain thinned to a hush. Somewhere in the house, the old fridge made a noise like a cautious toad. My body began to register its inventory. Again. The ache at my left hip where the deck bit me. The slice of cold under my nails. The fatigue that rises like fog when adrenaline crosses state lines and leaves you with the bill. "You should sleep," Michael said, strangely tender. You look like you fought something." "I did," I said. "I fought drowning." He flinched again. "I'm so—" "Don't," I said. "Not yet. Apologies are bridges. We will talk about bridges when we have maps." His mouth did that odd twist it does when he wants to argue and knows it is an old script. "What happens tomorrow?" "You resign," I said. "You tell the truth. You pack a bag that does not include the watch you think makes men listen. You go to Bay Street. Alma will teach you how to polish her copper pans, and you will do it until you can see the face you had at 17 in the shine." He closed his eyes and nodded. When he opened them, they were wet in a way he would have hidden if he were not very tired. "Do you remember the day you taught me to swim without touching the wall?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "You called me a monster. You smiled like you're smiling now," he said, and a thin laugh escaped him, the sound children make when they've survived a dare. "I thought you wanted me to drown." "I wanted you to learn the difference between panic and effort," I said. He looked at the knife again. "I will come in the morning." "Good," I said. "We will have coffee first." He stood once more, swayed, caught himself. "I'm going to the guest room. I'll call the driver. Lila will be fine without you for one night," I said. He nodded. At the door he turned back. "Mother." "Yes." "Thank you," he said, voice small and huge at once. "For what?" I asked, genuinely curious. "For not calling the police," he said, and left. When the house had finished settling after him, I let my breath out the way I taught myself to after my husband died. Stuttered, raw, credible. I took the knife out of the box and set it on the desk, tooth glimmering like a quiet threat. I touched the blade to the pad of my thumb, not enough to bleed, just enough to say hello to the edge. Then I put it back where they had seen it, because symbols have jobs too. In the hallway, 2 portraits hung across from each other. My father, hair like scrub grass, eyes like Gulf water before a storm. My husband, smile small and true, the particular softness in his mouth that made people tell him secrets and feel good after. I stood between them and wondered which one I'd been tonight. The truth was not a coin I could flip. The truth sat down on my shoulder and told me I'd been both, and that both had teeth, and that I was still here. Sleep came like an animal that doesn't like being watched. I stripped and showered, let hot water pare the salt off my skin, let the steam tell my lungs they could be a cathedral again. In bed, the sheets felt too clean for someone who had been inside the ocean. I closed my eyes and saw the blur of the yacht's white flank and my son's almost smile through water. I did not dream, or if I did, the dreams were quiet. The kind my mind files under inventory. Morning began as it always does in this house. The light at the edges first, then the gulls arguing about democracy. My phone lay on the nightstand, face down, because I do not allow it to be the first gaze I meet. When I turned it over, there were 3 messages from Rupert, each a single word. Done. Done. Coffee? I smiled and typed, 7:30. Bring a heart. On the stairs, I met Michael, already dressed, hair combed in the old careful way. He held 2 mugs and looked surprised that one of them reached my hand so naturally. Where is Lila? I asked. Gone, he said. She left before dawn. She texted me an address and a sentence. Don't be noble. She hates that in people, I said. She thinks nobility is what people wear when they can't afford better. Clothes. He almost smiled. And you? I know nobility is what people resort to when they discover money cannot buy the things they miss most. He looked down at his mug. I am going to disappoint you many times. I'm ready, I said. We took the old car. I drove. He watched. The live oaks lean into their own shadows. The road into the city always feels like forgiveness to me. A ribbon that remembers all the people who have taken it in the night, with mistakes piled in their passenger seat, and hope folded in their coat pocket. The skyline lifted its chin like a woman who has wasted a decade with the wrong man, and has just remembered her own phone number. Rupert was already in the office when we arrived, standing at the window like a spy from a more expensive novel. He turned when I came in and did something he's never done. He hugged me. It was brief and almost insulting and exactly right. You look alive, he said. I am, I said. Let's do the part where we pretend to be gentle while we break bones. He smiled. The board is in the conference room pretending to delay their meetings so they can take a call from you like saints. The outside counsel has sent me draft statement that surpasses the usual nonsense. I almost cried. Don't, I said. It makes you difficult to argue with. He glanced at Michael and his face did something only I would notice. A flinch so small it could be mistaken for a blink. Hello, young man. Michael nodded, color rising. Mr. Quayle. Rupert, he said. I address my problems on a first-name basis. We walked the hall together, and I felt, absurdly, as if we were approaching a ferry that would carry us somewhere less solid than home. The conference room glass had been frosted on the bottom half since an unfortunate incident years ago involving a partner's fondness for falling asleep. Now it made the legs of powerful people look like they were floating. When I entered, chairs scraped back. Men and women who owned private islands of their own, and would never call them that fitted expressions to their faces like ties. I did not. Sit. I stood at the head of the table, placed both hands flat on the wood, and let the room spend the first 10 seconds listening to the fact that I was not dead. Good morning, I said. Thank you for coming precisely on time to a meeting you will later recall as having been called at the last minute. There was a polite ripple. They are very good at laughter that does not leave fingerprints. Was in an accident yesterday, I said. I fell off the Meridian Star. I was retrieved. I'm fine. No one asked. Good. There were misunderstandings. They are being corrected. This is my son, Michael. He has statements to make. Michael stepped forward. I felt his hand tremble, not because it brushed me. I would not allow that, but because the air between us moved. He clasped his hands behind his back like the boy, who used to wait outside my office and pretend not to listen. I resign, he said, voice steady. Effective immediately, from all positions, paid and unpaid. My actions in recent weeks have fallen short of the standards of this company. I will participate in any investigation as requested. I will accept any restrictions on my access, including, but not limited to, the termination of my security clearances and access to systems. I apologize to each of you, and to the employees who will never know my name but know very well the consequences of what we do in rooms like this. A sound moved through the group, not quite approval, not quite hunger. There it was again. The dangerous pleasure people take in nobility when they do not have to pay for it. "Thank you," I said. Questions? They had 1,000, but they had learned from me and from the world that the first question someone asks you is the one they already have a press release for. A woman 2 seats down, sharp bob, sharper mind, spoke. "Mrs. Johnson, will you be resuming full executive control? Or is this a transitional presence?" "Transitional," I said. "The future does not require my signature on every page. It requires my shadow in the corner. They like that. They will repeat it with attribution until it is safe, then without." I didn't mind. Shadows do not care who names them. When the meeting dissolved into committees, when papers changed hands with the quiet urgency of birds snatching crumbs, I left Rupert and Michael to the refinements and walked to my office alone. I closed the door and put my forehead against the cool glass of the window. The city looked back at me with its complicated morning face. Deliveries and promises and smoke from the place on 3rd, where the baker refuses to modernize. On my desk, the second gift waited, not for Michael or Lila, for me. I had wrapped it months ago in brown paper, tied with string like an old book. I sat, untied it, and opened the box. Inside lay the photograph I keep under the second drawer. My son at 8, with his face painted, like a tiger, teeth bared, eyes too big for his stripes, and beside it, 2 letters I'd written to myself in the vocabulary of brutally kind people. One said, "If today arrives, breathe. Your lungs are yours." The other said, "Do not romanticize survival. It is work. Put your boots on." I smiled, small, true, and pulled on my boots. By noon, the day had begun to decide it was not going to break anyone new. Rupert left to feed the courts their amusements. Michael left for Bay Street, carrying a duffel that looked too new and too small, the way a beginning looks when you don't yet believe in it. I sat at the desk and dialed the cottage. Lila answered on the second ring. Her voice was clear. "If you say, 'How did you sleep?' I'm hanging up. I was going to say, 'Tell me the names,'" I said. She did. Not with drama, not with tears. With the precise, arid competence of a woman who has never once in her life tried to impress a mirror. The lawyer with the cologne that pretended to be modest. The consultant whose firm's website used too many nouns as verbs. The cousin in Miami, with a yacht broker friend who loved to tell stories that made him sound like a pirate with better teeth. A banker in Zurich with a laugh like a curtain rod. The house manager who had been skimming not money but afternoons off. When she finished, she said, "Are we done now?" "Not yet," I said. "You will come here. We will write it down together. You will sign. Then you will leave." "And after?" "After?" I said. "You will live in a city where nobody knows how your mouth looks when you win. You will take a job that uses your hands. You will date a poet and hate him. You will buy a dog and love it. And one day, if you are clever, and you are, you will forgive my son. Not because he deserves it, but because you do." A long pause. Then, "You really cannot help yourself." "No," I said. She laughed, small and tired and almost pretty. I'll be there in an hour." I hung up and leaned back. On the credenza, tide clock ticked, its red hand swinging toward slack water. Between flood and ebb there is a silence the old men at the docks honor with stories. They do not launch. They do not tie off. They watch the surface and remember the time their father's hands were a rope and a roof. Slack water is when the river remembers it was a sky once, and the ocean remembers it was a mountain. The door clicked. Alma's head appeared. White hair, in its stern bun, eyes the color of linen left on the line too long. She does not work here. She works in the world. But she considers my office a place where the world stops to put its hair back. "You look like you put a bell on Death's collar," she said. "I made him sit," I said. "He is not housebroken." She nodded. "The boy is at my place. He is trying to fold a fitted sheet." "Good," I said. "If he masters that, he can run an empire." She snorted. "Empires are easier. I brought you soup." I took the thermos. "You always know the right noun." "And you," she said, dry as driftwood, "always think you're the only verb." When she left, I ate the soup and tasted thyme and tomatoes, and the small mercy of food that does not demand conversation. I thought of my father's hands again, and of my husband's mouth, and of the girl Lila used to be before rooms taught her she could survive by stealing air. I thought of sharks, their weather, their obedience to currents older than our myths. 3. The phone rang. Rupert. "Your daughter-in-law's a menace," he said cheerfully. She made the assistant cry by speaking only in facts. "She does that to people who expected to be flattered," I said. "Do you need me?" "No," he said. "I just wanted to tell you the thing you think cannot be salvaged is already beginning to build itself again. It will not look the same. Congratulations." "Don't jinx it," I said, and we both knocked on wood without thinking. At 5, the sky pulled down a lid of pewter, and the city turned on its lamps. I stood at the window and watched office after office become a square of light with a single person bending over a problem that would never love them back. It is a soft, brutal sight, and I never tire of it. It makes me want to pay them all and tell them to go home. It makes me proud of being one of them and ashamed of what we make of ourselves. When I finally went home, the house smelled like rain and something new. Possibility, perhaps, or the absence of the panic that rides behind. You in a car and whispers about sharks. I sat at the desk and untied the ribbon on the gift box again, lifted the knife, weighed it in my palm. I took the tooth between finger and thumb, felt the fine saw of it. I did not mount it on the wall like a trophy. I did not throw it into the sea like a curse. I placed it in the drawer where I keep passports and stamps, and the note my husband wrote me on the day we bought our first truck. We will go as far as we can, and then build a road. The tooth lay there and did not argue. It did not need to. It knows the water better than I do. Later, much later, I would tell this story to a room of women who had all been pushed off one yacht or another, and we would laugh the low, private laugh of survivors who prefer verbs to nouns. I would call the talk weather, and someone would write about it in a magazine, and I would pretend not to care. Tonight I made tea without rust and took it to the porch. The sky had torn open in a stripe of lighter gray, a promise, a joke. Somewhere a siren mused about someone else's crisis. In my lap, the heat of the cup was the appropriate size. I looked at the water, which was not actually visible from my porch, but which lives under everything here, and said, because I sometimes speak to the things that try to take me, I am still here. The water, busy being old, did not answer. It didn't need to. I had learned the only lesson it has patience to teach. Keep your blade where you can reach it. Know the names of your weather. Do not confuse a shove for a summons. And when they come home smiling after leaving you to the teal, sharks, be sitting there with a gift and a map. The next morning's air wore the newness that comes after a storm, washed and a little stunned. I woke before the gulls and lay for a moment in the thin grey, listening to the house speak in old wood vowels. There is a sound a dwelling makes when it approves. Not louder, just more particular. The floor didn't crack as much as it articulated. Words like sound beams, announcing the weight of my steps. And beneath that, something stranger. Welcome, perhaps. Or relief. I showered, dressed in clothes I reserve for days when the world tries to turn itself into theater. Simple, exact. Silk that doesn't need to be admired to hold its ground. I tied my hair back and found the small pearl studs my husband liked because they looked like reasonable decisions. In the kitchen, I made coffee in the old press and buttered toast with the ugly knife whose handle sits right in my hand. I ate like someone who believes breakfast prevents wars. It often does. At 8:40, Lila arrived with her hair scraped, back into the kind of ponytail women use when they have chosen competence over charm. She wore no makeup except a smudge of something like defiance at the corners of her mouth. She carried a plain black tote. No delightful brand letters marching across it like soldiers. And she did not ask for coffee. I respected all of that more than I wanted to. We sat at the kitchen table, the one scarred by years and happier battles, and opened our notebooks like two negotiators who intend to be unremarkable. She laid out names, dates, locations, drafts, of conversations, patterns of persuasion so familiar, I could have diagrammed them before she spoke. She was specific. She was not cruel. She gave men their due where it was due, and withheld it where it wasn't. When she finished, she slid the notebook across to me. "You'll keep that," I said. "But we'll copy it." "I was hoping you'd say that," she said dryly. "I've seen too many crime movies to give the only copy to the matriarch." "You should avoid crime movies," I said. "They teach you that cleverness outruns consequence. It never does. It only slips into better shoes." She looked up, the old light limning her cheekbones. "Is that what you used to tell yourself?" "I told myself the truth," I said. "It's the only story that survives a storm." We transcribed. The printer clicked its ugly song. I wrote a letter in my hand. Sharp, schoolteacher neat. Addressed to the district attorney that I did not intend to send unless need demanded a drama. Summarizing what she had told me, and what I knew. I dated it, signed it, and sealed it in an envelope stamped with the gold crest of a bank that believes in performance. I put it in the middle drawer of my desk and closed it with the tiny finality drawers grant the decisive. "Now," I said, "we'll make food. If we're going to talk about annihilating men's careers, we should do it with eggs." She blinked and then laughed. Honest, surprised, no edges. "You are so strange." "I am old," I said. "Old women are what happens when strangeness sticks around long enough to pay taxes." She scrambled. I chopped. We ate leaning against the counter the way women eat when the conversation can't bear the formality of a table. Between bites, she asked, "Who is Rupert, really? He looks like an obituary that refuses to be written." "A man who knows where the bones are," I said. "And which ones belong to the museum." "You love him?" "In the way I love sharp instruments," I said. "As long as my fingers remember the grip." She finished first and rinsed her plate. She dried her hands carefully and then, to my surprise, turned and hugged me. It wasn't long. It wasn't even warm. It was a gesture like the setting down of a heavy package between two people. "I'm sorry," she said, close, low. For the whisper. For the push. For the plan. I am sorry in the way that will not help you and might help me if I let it. It cracked something in me I didn't know the weather had spared. I held her, briefly, like the mother of a girl who ran, too fast in flip-flops and fell. Good, I said. Let it. She stepped back. If I really leave, do I get to come back someday and pretend none of this happened? Is there a season called after? There is a season called work, I said. After is just what your hands call it when they've made something. She nodded. Then I'll go make something. She left soon after with a folder of copies, a coat that did not flatter her, and a kind of strange expectancy in her walk, as if the air was different, and she meant to learn its language. When the door closed, my body sagged into the chair, the way a sail slumps after wind. I let the house witness it. I'm not an actress here. I am its old friend. At noon, I went to Bay Street. Alma answered the door in an apron older than most lies. The kitchen smelled like onion softening, like bread terrified of its own glory, like the particular calm that rises when people surrender to recipes. In the sink, a fitted sheet sprawled, damp and chastened. Michael stood beside it, sleeves rolled, jaw set in a parody of patience. You are destroying that poor thing, Alma said, not looking at him. You are giving it the same face you gave your mother's china. I never, Michael began. You did, Alma said. When you were 14 and you tried to empty the cabinet for me and broke 2 saucers, you thought if you looked at them like that they would glue themselves. I kissed her cheek. She allowed it like a monarch permits a petition. How is our boy? He is a pile of nouns learning to be a verb, she said. He is very proud of his towel fold. I'm not proud, Michael muttered. I am resigned. Resignation is the first tidy drawer, Alma said. Now your mother is here. You can stop being dramatic and start being useful. Peel the carrots. He peeled. I washed. Alma told us about the neighbor who insists the fig tree is a hedonist. The radio offered music from 30 years ago because the station manager thinks nostalgia is good for the spine. Between the 3 of us, silence never had a chance to become heavy. It became a tool instead. After lunch, Michael and I walked the block just to see if the sidewalk remembered our names. The live oaks made their cathedral again, and he looked up the way he did as a boy, searching the leaves for the punchline of a joke God forgot to tell. I called Dr. Osei, he said without prompting. She sounds like the teacher who tells you the fire drill is not optional. She is, I said. You will like her. She does not laugh at your jokes, and she does not hate them either. She will ask you where your anger lives, and you will tell her it lives in your throat. She will say, let it move into your hands. You will not know how. She will teach you. He was quiet for a time and then, do you think I'm a bad man? I think you are a man, I said. Bad men do not ask that question until they are dead. I pushed you, he said, almost wonderingly, as if the words were a bead he rolled between thumb and forefinger. Or I let her, which is the same. Yes, I said, and you are walking with me. Yes. He slowed. Why? Because you're my son, I said simply. And because if I don't, the story we will all tell about ourselves will be smaller. I refuse small stories. We reached the corner and turned. The small hardware store that has existed since the war displayed rakes like flags. A boy of 20 leaned in the doorway paging through a comic, his thumb leaving a smudge on a panel, where a hero took the impossible on purpose. The day had warmed. The air smelled of cut grass and the metal tang of a storm remembering itself. Back at the house, Michael went to tackle the fitted sheet again and emerged with an object that looked like a question mark saluting. Alma clucked and fixed it with 3 deft tucks. He watched with awe a man usually reserves for astronauts or surgeons. "You do that with mergers," she said. "I do it with elastic." I stayed an hour more and then returned to the office, where the faint, sweet reek of toner and ambition greeted me like a cousin you love and don't trust. Rupert had turned my conference table into a topographical map of other people's mistakes. When he saw me, he smiled the way predatory mammals do when they're full and considering dessert. "Zurich called," he said. "Twice. They do not like it when people change the locks. They prefer the old keys, even if they never fit." "Tell Zurich to enjoy the Alps," I said. "The lawyer with the weak wrists has gone on vacation," Rupert added. "Somewhere with hammocks. We have arranged for him to be very busy with seasickness." "Excellent," I said. "And the star?" "Undergoing maintenance for camera failure," he said, not blinking. "Such a modern tragedy." He briefed me on 10 minor matters that would have been major on any other day. I made 3 decisions that felt like I'd poured concrete in the right hole. He watched me the way you watch a bridge after a tremor, and nodded once, satisfied that the bolts still believed in their mission. "Now," he said, "you should go home." "I have one more appointment," I said. "Send her in when she arrives." He tilted his head. "Her? Lila," I said. His mouth shaped a small "Oh?" I realize I've come to find offensive. "Good Lord. You are making a religion of magnanimity." "I'm making a life," I said. "Religion is someone else's job." When Lila came in, she wore jeans and a white shirt and an expression as bland as bread. She sat without asking and placed her phone on the table face down, as if presenting a hostage. I slid a legal pad toward her. "You will write a letter," I said. "To the board. Not about guilt. About harm. You will apologize to the people you cannot name but who live in the shadow of our decisions. The drivers who don't get to see their kids because someone pushed a deadline. The women cleaning the offices at midnight. The man who broke his back 3 years ago lifting a crate I insisted arrive an hour earlier than God intended. You will tell the board you see what your ambition did when it put on high heels. You will not ask for forgiveness. You will ask for a chance to be boring." She stared and then, slowly, she nodded. "I can do that." She wrote. I watched the words arrive in her hand like a tide finally consenting to go out. When she was done, she read it aloud. It was good. It tasted like honest bread. I signed it as received and Rupert made a sound like a gate locking. "Now," I said, "you will go. Do not call Michael. Do not text him. Do not send him a clever photograph of your breakfast. Let him learn the size of his own silence." Her eyes shone for the first time that day. "He's not strong enough alone." "He is," I said. "He just doesn't know which muscles to use." She stood, lifted the tote, and for a moment looked very young. "What will you do if I come back in 2 years and I'm better?" "Invite you in," I said, "and ask you what you made." "And if I come back in 2 years and I'm worse?" "Invite you in," I said, "and feed you, then send you away again." She laughed then, genuine and unflattering, and I liked her more than I wished. "Goodbye, Emma," she said. "Goodbye, Leela." She left. Rupert looked at me, eyebrows doing a small ballet. "You are a menace," he said fondly. "The city will have to build new scaffolding to hold up the stories. People tell about you." "I don't want stories," I said. "I want fewer men with weak wrists practicing law." "Ah," he said. "A fantasy life." That evening, after the paperwork lay obedient and the phones forgot how to ring, I stopped at the marina. The water nudged the pilings with the patience of an old habit. I walked the length of the dock and paused where the Star would have moored if it weren't, at the moment, a very large, very expensive metaphor on jacks. The wind carried the faint tread of a radio in some fisherman's cab, styled decades ago and immortalized by rust. A boy sat cross-legged near the end of the dock, a sketchbook on his knees. He looked up when I neared, ready to offer me the nervous apology children offer adults even when they're doing nothing wrong. His eyes were the hazel of unsure weather. "What are you drawing?" I asked. "The water," he said, flipping the book to show me. He had made the surface in graphite strokes, patient and insistent, a net of shade and light. "It won't hold still." "It never does," I said. "That's why we learn to love its motion." He nodded like I'd told him an answer to a question his teacher hadn't asked yet. "My dad says the tide is a big clock." "Your dad?" "Is right," I said. "But it tells more than time." "What does it tell?" "Who we are," I said, and felt ridiculous and true. Whether we're rising or falling, whether we're foolish enough to think we can stop either. He considered this with the gravity 8-year-olds lend to nouns. "I'm drawing the part where it's in between," he said. "When it looks the same but is actually deciding." "Slack water," I said. "You'll get it." When I reached my car, I saw I'd missed a call from an international number I recognized. A woman in Singapore who saves ships by thinking faster than storms. I returned it leaning against the hood, the metal warm from the day's last breath. "Emma," she said, the syllables of my name crisp as celery. "I hear you took a swim." "Briefly," I said. "I advise against it," she said. "The water is never as flattered as you hope." "True," I said, smiling at the sky. "How are my routes?" "Adaptable," she said. "Like you." We spoke of currents and traffic, and the new satellite we were quietly courting with charm and promise. When I hung up, the sky had shaved itself down to a pale rim over the horizon, a blade laid flat. I got in the car and drove home through a world that had decided for the moment to sit still. At the house, I opened the drawer with the passports and the note and the tooth. I looked at the serrations again and considered taking it out just to feel the old pulse of fear steady itself in my hand. Then I closed the drawer. I didn't need talismans tonight. Instead, I took out paper and wrote 3 letters in longhand. The kind of letters that take a little of your life and make it readable. One to Matteo, thanking him for his hands, and the daisy he doesn't yet know he will receive for his mother. One to the board member with the sharp bob telling her she has my support. When she makes the motion I've been waiting to hear for 3 years. One to myself, because old women deserve mail too. I sealed them, addressed them, set them by the door. I made tea that didn't pretend to be anything but leaves and heat. I took it to the porch again and watched the darkness consider me. Somewhere beyond, the water exhaled. The air put its hand on my hair like an apology it didn't quite know how to phrase. When sleep came, it brought a dream in which my father taught me to tie a knot with my eyes closed, and my husband kissed the place on my wrist where the pulse, lives, and my son, small and fierce, swam the length of a pool without touching the wall. He reached the other side, stood up, spat water, and looked at me with his tiger face, and I said, "There you are." The morning after that, and after that, and after, filled itself with the work of being alive. Papers, calls, small mercies. Michael texted photographs of a stew he had made under Alma's scorn. Lila sent nothing at all, which was the most eloquent message she could offer. Rupert sent a link to a news item that managed to be true without being cruel. I forwarded it to no one, which is a discipline I recommend if you wish to sleep. Weeks settled like new paint. The smell faded. The color stayed. In therapy, Michael learned to put his anger in his hands. He built shelves. He planted herbs. He fixed the leg of a chair. He wrote letters to no one and burned them because fire has its own appetite for apology. He came to my office and sat in the chair he used to slouch in, and he listened when engineers told stories that did not center him. He said, "I don't know," like he meant it. The first time he thanked a janitor, he did not make it a production. Progress is ugly when it starts. It becomes handsome eventually, and then it becomes boring, which is how you know it's working. For me, I met with the women at the foundation and told them we would do less with more people. They applauded like I had solved the square root of something. And then we argued about the cost of dignity in neighborhoods whose names donors mispronounce. I walked the docks and tipped boys who didn't expect it, and scolded men who did. I bought pears on Thursday because they looked like ships in the sun. I slept. I woke. The tide clock kept time with a generosity that made me blush. And sometimes when I closed my eyes, I still felt the hush after the shove, the drop into the blue, the burn of salt. It did not terrify me anymore. It did something worse and better. It clarified. It reminded me that weather is not mean. It is indifferent. That people are not weather, though we pretend to be. That a blade within reach is not a threat when you know you will use it to cut a net and not a throat. On a Sunday afternoon full of laundry and violins from the neighbor's window, I found myself at the table with Alma, hemming a cloth napkin that had forgotten its allegiance to edge. She squinted and said, "Your stitches are arrogant." "I know," I said. "I always think thread should obey me." "It will," she said, "if you learn its language." "Isn't that true of everything?" I said, and she gave me a look that said, "Not men," and we laughed. The doorbell rang then, a polite chime that refuses drama. Michael opened it. Lila stood on the porch in a dress that suited weather, not rooms. Her hair was shorter. Her mouth had learned something about quiet. "Hello," she said. "I came to give back a thing I took." Michael looked at me. I looked at the tide clock. Slack water leaned toward flood. "Let her in," I said. She stepped into the hallway and held out her hand. On her palm lay my lemon tree key. The spare, the one I keep for people who don't know yet where the gate sticks. I took it and felt the tiny weight of it the way a pen feels heavier when you're about to sign a truth. "Thank you," I said. "I also came to tell you," she said, "that I am leaving." "For where?" Michael asked, the boy and the man arguing softly in the space where his voice lived. "Portland," she said. "They have rain and coffee and people who think poetry sells tables. I got a job in a place that makes chairs by hand." "Chairs," I said, unable to keep the smile from my voice. "Good. They hold people up without speeches." She smiled. Small, private, nothing like a magazine, and looked past me to Alma, who was threading a needle like a challenge. "Can I help?" she asked. Alma considered her, eyes narrow, then lifted the cloth. "Show me your stitch," she said. Lila sat. Her hands were less certain than her voice had always been. The needle went in, out, in. She watched the thread behave, and for the first time, I believed we might all learn a language that didn't require applause to prove it existed. When she finished, Alma grunted approval. "You'll do." Lila stood and faced me. "I am sorry," she said again, not as a plea but as a fact. "I know," I said. "Write to me when you've made a chair that doesn't wobble." "I will," she said. "And if he—" She did not look at Michael. "If he learns to hold a fitted sheet, tell him I said congratulations." "I'll tell him," I said. She left. We watched her walk down the path, her back carrying neither apology nor pride, just a person-shaped thing moving through air that had made room for it. Michael leaned against the doorframe and let out a breath I had not realized he'd been holding for months. Are we? He began. "We are," I said. "Now peel potatoes." He laughed. It wasn't noble or cinematic. It was just the laugh of a man whose throat had moved out and let his hands have the leash. That night, when the house went still and the water rehearsed its old lullaby beyond the range of my porch, I opened the drawer again and looked at the tooth. It had not changed, but everything around it had. I left it there and closed the drawer gently, like a door you intend to open again, only when you have a very good reason. I am Emma Johnson. I was pushed off a yacht. I swam. I sat at my desk with a gift that was a knife and a map that was a conversation. I watched my son step into a sentence he had never practiced, because no one had forced him to. I fed a girl who had learned the wrong music and taught her another song. I turned weather into work. And when the tide stood still to listen, I told it what I had made with the time it loaned me. The tide did what tides do. It rose. It fell. It rose. The tide did what tides do. It rose. It fell. It rose. And so did I. In the months that followed, life took on a quieter rhythm, not without its shadows, but lighter than the storm I had endured. Michael stayed at Bay Street, learning to live with his own hands. He planted herbs, folded sheets until they obeyed him, and wrote letters he never sent. He became, at last, a man who could stand without my shadow pressing him down. Lila vanished into another life. From Portland came a single postcard. "I'm learning to make chairs. They wobble less than I do now. I placed it in a drawer with no bitterness, only the quiet knowledge that sometimes people must be broken open to find what was inside them all along." At the company, Rupert held the reins with his usual feline patience. I appeared only when necessary, my presence no longer a weapon, but a reminder. The board whispered about transition, legacy, succession. But I had already chosen my legacy. Not power, but survival with dignity intact. On the eve of my 70th birthday, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The drawer inside held the shark's tooth, unchanged. Yet I no longer saw it as a warning. It was a lesson, plain and permanent. You can be cast into the deep, and still surface breathing, I whispered into the night air. I am Emma Johnson. I was pushed into the sea, and I rose. I was betrayed, and I endured. And now, I live. The waves answered in their ancient tongue. Steady, endless, beyond betrayal. And I listened, not as a woman at war with water, but as one finally at peace with its song. 3 years later, I returned to the sea. Not on a yacht, not as a spectacle, but on a modest boat, hired from fishermen who knew the currents better than clocks. The morning was quiet, the horizon painted in silver, the water soft as memory. Michael stood beside me, taller in spirit now, his face carrying the calm of a man who had survived his own storms. He no longer wore ambition like armor. He wore it like a tool, practical and steady. He spoke of the gardens he'd planted, the people he'd helped, the work that no longer needed my name to be real. From Portland, a letter had arrived weeks earlier. Lila wrote that she was teaching apprentices how to carve wood, and that one of her chairs had been sold to a library. She said she had learned to make things that held people up. I smiled when I read it. That, I thought, was all I had ever wanted, for her and for my son. On the deck, I held the small shark's tooth one last time. Its edges were still sharp, but my fear of them had dulled. I let it fall into the sea. A gift returned. The water closed over it without ceremony, as if to say, "You have carried this long enough." The tide moved, as it always does. It rose. It fell. It rose. And I, Emma Johnson, rose with it, no longer defined by betrayal, but by the simple fact of endurance and the peace of knowing that survival, too, can be an inheritance. Years slipped by with the patience of tides. My days no longer belonged to boardrooms or storms, but to smaller rituals. Tea on the porch, letters written in longhand, the satisfaction of mending things that could still be made whole. Michael built a quiet life. He ran no empire, but he grew into a man who understood the weight of honesty. Sometimes he visited, bringing herbs from his garden, or stories from neighbors who knew him simply as Michael, not as my heir. That anonymity was his redemption. Lila's name surfaced now and then, in articles about craftsmanship, in the signature, carved beneath a line of handmade chairs. She had found her own language, one of wood and balance. I did not interfere. Survival had taught me that some stories must continue without us watching. As for me, I chose to leave the company's helm, for good. I watched from the distance of memory as others carried it forward, no longer needing my shadow. My legacy was not in their ledgers, but in the knowledge that I had faced the deep and risen. On the final evening I kept the house. I walked alone to the shoreline. The horizon glowed with the last light of day, and the sea breathed steadily as it always had. I whispered my name, not to claim power, but simply to hear it carried on the wind. I am Emma Johnson. I was tested, I endured, and I lived. The waves answered with their endless refrain, pulling and giving, rising and falling. I listened until I could no longer tell where my breath ended and the ocean began. The tide did what tides do. It rose, it fell, it rose, and so did I.